Hi everyone, welcome to Adobe Live. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today. We'd also like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We are back for part 2, Photoshop Magic. I called it on Instagram because it is magic, with photographic and digital artist Karen Alsop. Karen, how are you going?
I'm going so well, Flynn. Thanks for having me back.
That's awesome. We had a great time on Tuesday. Learned a lot about you and your artwork. We jumped around from Lightroom, Photoshop. We even had a little bit of capture involved there. So if you missed any of that, feel free to jump back and check that out. But we'll kind of do a little bit of a recap and kind of continue on from where we were, spending some time in Photoshop and checking out some cool things. If you are over on Twitter or you're over on YouTube, jump on over to behance.net/live if you want us to see your comments and things like that. Just like our friends Manny, Kerry, and Gareth. Johanna's here as well, looking after us with the stream, our fantastic chat mod, hanging out with us for the next hour. And yeah, feel free to ask questions as we're going along. There's always so much depth in Photoshop, so there's no such thing as a silly question unless you don't ask it. So please ask away while we have the fantastic Karen with us. But yeah, Karen, should we do a bit of a recap on what we did on Tuesday and kind of segue into what we're up to today?
Yeah, let's take a look at the file and see how far we got. And
Okay.
So this was the base image that we started working with. It's a combination actually of a couple of shots that I took of Puffing Billy and the furnace. So Puffing Billy being a steam train in Melbourne that's over 100 years old. And the concept of this one is to have an echidna shoveling the coal into the furnace, working really hard, and it's part of a series that is going to be on exhibition at the Puffing Billy Visitor Centre over the next few months. So I have a deadline, and nothing like pressure working live on a project that I am halfway in the middle of. So it's been fun.
I love it. Extra credit points, extra Adobe Live points for working on like a real project that has a real deadline while we're all watching you and asking questions. It's cool.
I know. I love the pressure. It's all fine.
Yeah.
So I'll go through the layers here. I'll just start from the bottom and work my way up just to show you how I built this. But obviously go back to the first one because we go into it a whole lot more. But I'm building this echidna out of multiple photos that I've taken. So I'm going to just pop the shadows in down there. They're rough shadows there at the moment that I've placed there just for a bit of grounding. If I get time today, I will work through those shadows and show you how I do them. Then I'm going to pop that on. So this is the echidna, or the sort of the full thing there. And there is a hat that I photographed, and I showed you how I photographed that in the first session, just on the iPhone using Lightroom CC and bringing that in. So that hat was just a really quick shot. But all the rest of the elements I photographed with my Nikon Z9. So this echidna is built from so many different parts. I did add in a new foot. So we talked about the foot last session, and there was in the old foot, if I turn the old foot on and I turn the new foot off and I zoom up on,
oh wow, it's a subtle difference, like zoomed out, like at the size that you would see it. So that's interesting, like the level of detail that you go into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I print these really big, so
Right.
they're going to be on exhibit at 1 meter by 1 meter on big canvases.
Right.
So I do need to consider all of the little details. And yeah, this particular foot, while the front section there is in focus, the back section here is really quite out of focus. So I needed to either replace just this section, which I did have a little play with in between, but then I did go through my collection and realized, hang on, I think I have a better foot that is more in focus all the way through. So if I turn that one off and I turn my new one back on, it's much better. It's still not completely sharp in all areas. You know, the sharp area, you can sort of see where it drops off a little bit as it goes further away from the lens. But overall, and certainly from a distance, if we go back, it's sharp enough to do the job. And at the end of when I sort of finish work, I do a lot of dodging and burning. So all of the areas that need a little bit more sharpening, I'll work on those too. So yeah, so that was changed over. If I keep going down, so I'll turn off the foot, the head. So you can see, if you're just tuning in, you haven't seen the build of this, you can see how many body parts that I need to bring in to make this echidna do what I want it to do, because, you know, it's just not easy to get an echidna to pose with a shovel.
It's a particularly challenging creature to work with, right? I actually think we had a question that I may not have got to in the last session, so I'll ask now.
Yeah.
Is, you know, what are the hardest animals? Is the echidna like it? Is this, because we're trying to make this anamorphic. I can never say it on stream. As soon as the stream finishes, I'll say it 20 times correctly. Human-like creatures. You know, is the echidna the hardest? Because with all the fine detail, and they're very floppy and round and things. Yeah, so what's the hardest animal to
It's certainly up there with level of complexity, because it's not just about, you know, capturing all those parts, but you never normally would see an echidna on this angle, because, you know, normally when you find an echidna, it's sort of crawling along the side of the road and burying its snout in the ground. And previously, I think I mentioned I had plans to go and photograph an echidna in the Grampians, and COVID happened and lockdown, and that echidna had to be released. While I was in lockdown, my family found an echidna just down the road while they were on a walk, and so they called me, quick, come, you can photograph it. So I'm on the side of a main road, literally just like bobbing down with my camera, trying to take photos of this echidna from a safe distance so it wasn't freaked out. And yeah, that all I got was that side profile. So when the opportunity arose to properly photograph an echidna that was a rescue echidna, that I had a bit more flexibility with angles, I knew that this would work a whole lot better. But yeah, it's that kind of thing where you're trying to photograph the animal on angles that it normally wouldn't kind of be on. So it's been fun. It's been fun. So yeah, so that's I guess that's the overview of where we're at. I did do a little bit of tidy up in this area. So yes, last time I worked on some masking techniques and bringing out the spines, and then using a hairbrush to mask back in the hair. So I did that all around here. So I cleaned all of this area up. And I've done a little bit of sort of patching, cloning, healing in this area as well. So just some general cleanup. But what we need to do today is working on this shovel, working on the hands, cleaning that up, removing the blue tinge that's on the edge, sort of shading and shadowing underneath there, and just making this all fit in nicely. If we get time, we'll work a bit on that hat. There may be a bit of puppet warp that we need to do to pull it exactly how I want to, and actually have some of those spines come up over the top of the hat, and adjust the light that's it's a little bit bright there, but knowing that I'm going to enhance this furnace later too. So there is going to be some more light that's coming out of this furnace. I think one other thing that I did do in the meantime, and I mentioned it in the last live, was just do some adjustments to that window area. So if I turn that off, so I've got some extra layers here. This was the original. The area in that window is very, very bright. So it's drawing the eyes away from the subject. So I'm working on toning that down, just with adding some, adding an engine very subtly behind, and then some smoke effects, and I'll have to build on that. If I turn this engine opacity up, you can see that this area here creates a bit of a problem, because it was so heavily backlit that it's actually washed out naturally. So either I enhance this and make it darker, which can certainly be done, might take a little bit of time, or I go with still quite a bright background to match. And it's the same thing when you work with replacing skies and things like that in images. You really want to work with something that's not too far removed from that original sky. So yeah, so that's, I guess, where we're up to.
Cool. Well, lots to come and check out. We have our first question. So if anybody has a question while we're going along, please don't, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Question is, what are the key things you look for or double check when creating a piece that will be printed on a large canvas?
Yeah. So first thing I do is I make sure that I'm photographing with a camera that has a reasonable resolution. So this one, the Z9, is 44 megapixels. I think approximately. And that, to start with an image from this camera or a Z7 or any camera that's equivalent, means that you've got a base image that will print quite large. So I've had my work printed on the side of a bus. So I know that, yeah. So the bigger it goes, the more you stand back. So you effectively, you don't need to keep pushing that resolution up the bigger it goes, because those images will be viewed from further back. And
right, so like buses or billboards or something on the side of a building or something. Yeah,
that's right. There are some works, I've had some works printed up to 3 meters high in a hotel. I did push that resolution further, so I made sure I actually merged images together to create a higher resolution file, because I knew that people would be standing quite close to it. So it just depends on that end result. But most of the time, it's just starting with that file that's out of the camera, knowing that that's the right resolution for most cases, and going from there.
Oh, cool. Very good. And as I said, if anyone else has questions while we're going along, throw them in chat.
Yeah, awesome. So I thought it might be good to go back a little bit and talk about the series that this is going into before I keep going on the file. So I've got this series here. So this is the series. I showed this quickly last time. This series is the Puffing Billy series that has been merchandised by Puffing Billy. So just a little bit of background. We were in lockdown, and then we weren't, and then we were, and then we weren't. We live about 20 minutes away from Puffing Billy. So in a time where we were allowed out a little bit further, maybe it was 20 kilometres, we visited the Puffing Billy in Emerald and noticed that there's a $20 million facility being built, a new visitor centre. So immediately, my thought was, I could create something that would cater to tourists. It would be something that Puffing Billy would love to have to put on T-shirts and coasters and puzzles. It brings the animals together and a lot of the stock that I had already collected over the years. So bringing that together with the theme of Puffing Billy and the Dandenong Ranges. So I actually went ahead and created 2 initial images. So if I go back, the first one was this one, and then I did the kookaburra. So I did those first 2, and I sent them to Puffing Billy and had a little bit of a conversation, shared the idea, shared the concept, and they were just completely excited and thought it was a fantastic idea. So it sort of went from that to, okay, I'll create a whole series. We're merchandising it. So now they're selling that up in the new shop that's opened, and now let's have a massive exhibition. So now they're going to be on exhibit with a bunch of my other work up there for 3 months. So, don't be afraid to just jump out there and approach someone and just go, hey, I've got an idea. So that's the concept of this series. It's quite sort of straightforward with its theme. It's animals connected with Puffing Billy. So
very nice.
That's where we're at. So that's where the Echidna comes in.
Okay.
But prior to that, the reason that I've kind of got all these images of Australian animals is my Homeless Wildlife series. And I did show that last time, and I'll just jump onto the kangaroo one here. So this was the first in the Homeless Wildlife series, and this is Homeless Joey. It's a real rescue Joey, lost its mum, and this is, just one of those images that tugs at the heartstrings and hopefully makes people kind of stop and realise that, first of all, if they do crash into a kangaroo, maybe check the pouch, make sure that there's no joey there, but just to kind of bring an awareness and make them feel like they're human-like, and how would they feel if it was their child. So that kind of thing. So perhaps that's a segue into the video about this one, just to share a little bit behind the scenes.
Okay, and this is the Homeless Joey one. I have that
video.
This
is Homeless Joey, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
All right, let's check it out. We'll be back in a sec. Let's watch it together.
A lot of people do blame themselves. Like, I still haven't hit an animal yet. I've come close, and he went to jump in front of my car. And it was just because I had my lights on and I could just see him that I was managing to stop, and I managed to swerve, even though you're not meant to swerve. But it's just, like, I can't imagine how horrible it would be to hit them. But it's just one of those things, like, you need to, they still have feelings, they still feel pain, they can, like, they might not show it, but they can still feel it, same as dogs and same as cats, they can still feel pain. And roos are designed, or wild animals technically are even designed not to show that pain, because they're a wild animal. So they can be in excruciating pain, but they won't show it because they're wild. They need to know that they're safe, and that's their way of showing it. So I think having these pictures out there will make a lot more people conscious and aware that there's actually another living thing, or possibly another living thing in those pouches, and that they do show pain and do show like signs of grieving and stuff. Like, I've seen many roos that have grieved, so they do grieve, and people don't realise that. People don't realise the extent that they actually show emotion to. So seeing that side of things and seeing that side of the emotions and stuff that they do show and do hold, I think will be a big eye opener to people.
Really amazing. I just listening to the contrast of our, like, chill music in the background, and it's like boop, 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 and, like, compared to that, quite a segue. That's fantastic. Like, thank you for sharing that with us.
As I shared, last week too, I find part of the creation process is not just creating these works, but having that behind the scenes video and sort of sharing that story. So for anyone that hasn't kind of delved into the whole video side of things, I want to encourage you to do it, because it is really powerful. And, sometimes I just use Adobe Rush, like, to do something quick. Other times I'll spend a bit more time in Premiere or even After Effects, but it's amazing how quick and easy you can put something like that together. Throw people cameras that have never used cameras before and just grab the footage off them. So so that's that. But should we jump into working on this one?
Let's jump in.
Echidna.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so the next step, so I'll take you through a few things. Obviously, I can't cover everything. You saw, speed edits, it can take about 50 hours really sometimes to make these pieces.
Wow. Yeah.
But the next thing that I was going to work on was this shovel. So we sort of started that, and I did a little bit of cleanup in the last session. But one of the things that you'd notice here is there is some color cast, which has come from the train or come from the environment around. And I wanted to show you just a really quick fix for that. I mean, a lot of the time people might use something like hue saturation adjustment layer to get rid of the blues. Maybe you've shot on green screen and you need to get rid of the green, and that can be a good way of doing it. But what I found, one really quick and easy way, is to create a new layer and then create a clipping mask and change that to a blending mode that is right down the bottom, color. And then use a soft brush. So this one is currently, let's turn that hardness down to 0. And let's just see, I did have my, the crosshairs coming up. That's normally because caps lock's on, but caps lock's off. So what have I pressed? And we're live again. There we go.
Oh, it's just massive. That's the thing.
I know,
That's
it's
so
massive.
funny.
And I got confused because I did have caps lock on first. If anyone ever comes across that, it is like one of those things that drives you mad when you don't know what it is. If you have caps lock on, the cross comes up and you're like, where's my circle? So make sure caps.
It's a good tip. That's definitely happened to me before.
Yeah. So all I do is just use Alt or Option, grab the color from nearby and just paint it over the top. Let's just make sure the flow is 100%. So just running that over the top, grab it from the areas nearby. So as you're moving, maybe change it, and let's zoom up. Over here, so you can see the color changing.
Yeah, wow. That's great. So you created the clipping mask. So had you already cut out the shovel's on a separate layer because you've already cut it out to bring it in, right? You've already cropped it. So you don't need to retrace it because it's a separate element already.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. It's got the mask there. So if I turn on the mask, you can see it's already cut out. You know, when I do turn on that mask too, that's a really good trick to sort of see if there's any errors. And I can see one there. So that backslash will bring up the mask in red. And we need to just maybe straighten up this area here. So just to go over that, I click, I hold down Shift, and I can keep tapping and it will create a straight line. If I do it here, you can see Shift makes a straight line. And so that's just sort of a quick and easy way just to make sure and to clean up, because quite often, you know, you'll be working on the image that's on the layer, and because the color's so close, you can't see that issue, but it just helps you to clean that up. Okay, so if we go over here, there's possibly a little bit of cleanup here on this part of the shovel. I'll do it very, very quickly because I want to get onto that next bit. But again, I'm going to just have a look at that mask. And this part of the shovel, so you might be wondering, okay, that's mask. So where's that part of the shovel coming from? That is coming from the coal that I've placed on the shovel. And so that's a completely separate image that I grabbed really, really quickly when he was shoveling coal. So the guy that was in the train was shoveling the coal. So I grabbed a few shots of that, hoping that I could use it. But, you know, sometimes when someone's busy doing things and they're not there to be your model, even though you're kind of hoping that you can ask them to do things, that you got to just sort of grab what you can. So I did that, grabbed that shot, and then I can use that and merge it. So it's a very rough merge right at the moment. And it needs a clean up. So these two parts need to blend together nicely. So this mask here needs a little bit of a fix up. So we can do that same thing, Shift. If you mess up, I talked about it last week, having my finger on X, so the shortcut between white and black. And just cleaning it up around the edge. Just drawing with the pen. So I'm using a Wacom graphics tablet and I'm using the pen. It gives you a whole lot more control than a mouse does. And then looking at this area here, maybe just blending that more subtly with the shovel underneath. So pulling down the hardness, turning down the flow, and actually turning off the overlay so I can see what it is that I'm doing here and how they're going to blend together. So it really is just kind of doing it by the eye and just making sure that it blends. So there'll be some adjustments that need to be made, levels adjustments to sort of blend this in further. So where the rocks meet the shovel. But a soft blend will be a good start. There's an area around here, obviously that shovel needs to be behind this part of the background. So that's where I've got everything in a folder. So all of the shovel and the coal is in a folder. And if I turn that on, actually, let's just check that. Yeah, that's where it is. So I am going to blend this backwards because I want to use the folder to do the cutout. So I'm just going to bring that back and go back to the folder. So what I'm doing is using the folder to adjust or to mask both sections rather than just one section.
Right.
Yeah. So if I need to go back to a hard brush, so about 80% hardness, and turn up my flow and just use that technique again where I go shift. Oh, hang on, that way. Turn off that. Shift. Oh, wrong way around. Oh, that is another little thing that happens. When you turn the overlay on, it actually kind of reverses what you were working on, black or white. And then when you turn the overlay off, you have to go back to the black or back to the white, whichever one you're using. So
right, because you swapped your foreground and background color with the X.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Very cool. And just a reminder as we're going through, if you have any questions, want any advice or anything like that, let us know in chat as we're rolling through.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too long on that. That'll take a little bit of extra time kind of cleaning that up and adding some shadow in this section here and just making it so that it all blends together. But the next area that I want to sort of show is fixing up the fingers and then adding some contact shadows underneath, because it's all fine to kind of just put something in the echidna's hand, but if there's no contact shadows there, it's really not going to make, it's not going to work. So what I do need to do is clean up all of these areas. So these are all really rough cutouts. So I'll first go to the head.
And contact shadow, it sounds like what it is, I assume. I haven't heard that term before, so it's just where the shape or something is contacting like another shape, I guess. So where the claws to give it some realism.
That's right. So it could be when it's under the foot, or it could be as it is in this circumstance under the hands or under the claws. Yeah. So there's sort of different levels of shadows that I would work on. So contact shadows, and then there might be shape shadows if they were required as well. Shape shadows are those sort of longer shadows that are the shape of the animal. And so you'd see shape shadows when there's a very strong sun cast from one direction. So what I'm going to do here is just clean that up. We've got in there another folder that is the hand. So that's that backhand. And that just needs a little bit of tidy up as well. So if I bring that back, you can see that there was a blue glove that the lady that was holding the echidna had. Now you can see the other issue I've got is because I did a really quick cutout, this area is actually being covered by the shovel. So I don't need to bring that back. I need to go to the shovel group to fix that.
Right.
So it can get confusing working on kind of layers above and layers below and working out which layer is actually covering something up. So yeah, again, label everything and have sort of everything in the right layer order.
Speaking of which, I have a question from Douglas. Do you keep all the elements / masks, etc., for each image in their own separate folder?
Okay, no, that's a really good question. So at the moment, I am working with everything kind of in folders so that I can organize all those different parts. But when I'm happy with the overall echidna and it's completely kind of as I want it and it's all together, then I would take that echidna and I would make that a smart object. So a smart object, I've got smart objects of the raws, so I would convert it to a smart object. I won't do that until I've finished because I need to kind of edit all these bits in place. Press the wrong button. But that's how I would sort of manage it, because that way then I can work with the echidna as a whole and sort of move it around and adjust it and add light and shadow on the whole thing. So I hope that answers Douglas.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And so, yeah, where was I? I'll go back to the shovel layer because that is covering up the hands here. So you can see that it's over the top. So we need to bring that back. So by turning the overlay on and off, I can tell which parts are the ones that I need to fix. So it's this mask that needs the work. So just going in and bringing back the shovel where I need it.
I need to just do a little bit of a segue. Shout out to Andrew Hockradell in chat, who is a massive Paddington Bear fanboy. And I noticed one of your pieces of work was Paddington Bear.
Yes.
So just so everybody understands what this link is, I'm sharing in chat. That's for you, Andrew. I thought of you when I saw it.
Yeah, the Paddington Bear one I did quite some time ago, I think about 6 years ago. And my daughter was Paddington Bear, and the head of Paddington Bear is a dog. So it's one of those dogs that look like a bear.
Right.
So yeah, super fun to create. It was really, really. And the station master was the real station master from Puffing Billy. So he was just there, and I asked him on the day, "You want to pose for me?" And he's like, "Yes, yeah, that'd be fun." So that's what we did.
Nice.
Okay, so this part of the shovel group is part of the coal. So there's sort of that two parts of the shovel that are being used here. So I'm not going to worry about all this bit here. What I want to show is over here, spend the time on the contact shadows. So now we've got the claws there. We need to create these contact shadows underneath. Because I've cut the shovel, this is a bit of reverse to what I normally do, but the shovel is on top. The shovel in the layer group is actually on top. So what I am going to do is create a layer, levels adjustment layer for the shadows. And I'm going to clip it to the shovel so that the shadows only appear on the shovel. We don't want the shadows to appear on the claws or on anything else. I am going to pull the light out of the scene. So up here with the levels, I'm going to pull that down. So now it looks like a shadow. So I'm pulling the light out of the scene. I go back to the mask, Command I, invert, and then I go in with the brush. Now in this case, I'm going to use a pressure sensitive brush. I'm going to make the hardness around 50%, so halfway in between. And I'm going to build up on the shadows. I'll turn the flow right down because it's a bit of a, yeah, you sort of build it up and don't do it all at once. Now, the trick with something like this is that these claws, they're floating above the shovel. It's this part here, right here.
Right. So you got to think about how would the creature actually be holding the item, right?
Yeah. And what part is actually hitting the edge of the shovel? So it's sort of that corner there. Whereas the rest of it, it's sort of up and over. So there needs to be, it needs to be softer as it goes further away. It needs to be further away from, so not directly underneath. So the way that I kind of do this is actually to look at shadows. So literally just hold my hand, like you've just got to look at shadows and how they fall, you know, shine lights on things and then examine them. Or if in your image you've got something as a reference, then you can use that as a reference. But it does take a little bit of time. But if you were to do these shadows just as a straight drop shadow, it wouldn't make sense. It just doesn't make visual sense. So you do need to be able to draw them in yourself.
Yeah, and I like that idea of like kind of painting the shadow and doing it over time rather than trying to guess it and keeping it exact, and using the pressure sensitivity to just kind of bring it in slowly over time, build it up until I guess it looks right. Exactly.
Yeah. And what I tend to do too is maybe not just one layer, but multiple. So building it up over multiple layers as well. But let's just go with it sort of something like that. And then I'll do another layer that's a bit softer. So it's a bit more, it's not a contact shadow as such, but it's creating just a little bit of a soft shadow in that general area to darken that general area up. So exactly the same thing, levels adjustment layer, pull the light out, invert it, so Command I. And then in this case, I'll actually turn off pressure sensitivity and just make this section here. I'm sort of tapping. So in this case, I'm not really drawing, I'm kind of tapping, just to build up a little bit of extra darkness in this general area. And, you know, even under this section, because the neck or the snout is over this area. So again, keeping my hand on X, my finger on X to, as I'm going, oh, yep, that needs to be a bit darker, that bit needs to be a bit lighter, and just thinking about where the light needs to fall. If I go back to this original shadow, I might use this layer to go back to pressure sensitivity and just have a think about where would this shadow be. And it will be a little bit further over actually. It'll sort of, because the light's coming from behind, it's coming from the furnace as well. Sometimes you need to consider if there's actually cross shadows, which in this case there might be some, because there's two areas of light that will be coming out. So I'm going to zoom back.
And you mentioned earlier that you're intending to make the light coming out of the furnace to be a little bit more intense, or like have a bit more of an effect on the rest of it, which is quite interesting. You have to think a lot of moves ahead to kind of go back and do that sort of detail, don't you? Because, you know, if you change the light later, you may have to come back in here and change everything again. Yeah.
Exactly. What I might actually do is just show you that the furnace, I've got another furnace where the fire was bigger, so he'd just thrown coals in, and sort of how I'd blend that in and brighten this area up. But there's all this light that actually needs to be adjusted as well. So on the edge of the spine, these little bits need to have some rim light because of the light that's coming from behind. So they literally have to match this kind of rim light. That's a natural rim light that came from the window, because there's none here. The Echidna was shot on an overcast day, and that makes it really flexible to blend the Echidna together, but it does mean that rim light needs to kind of target this area. It'll need to target the snout and all of those spaces as well. That's where I do that right at the end. So once Echidna's whole, it's all put together perfectly, make it a smart object, and then start just adjusting the light on the Echidna to match those where that light's coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. We have a question from chat. Do you, I'll start again. Do you typically have at least 2 layers of shadow in your work?
At least 2. Yeah, I typically would. So that just gives me that flexibility, even down below here. So underneath here, which these ones are a bit rough. They need some work. There are 2 levels. One of them is the shape, the contact shadow or the shape shadow. And then the other one is that kind of extra darkening in that general area, which helps to blend it all together. So at the very least, yes. Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, so let's just jump over to Bridge. And I am going to, so from Bridge, I've got all the photos that I need in here, and I'm going to grab this one and open it directly in Photoshop. This is going to open in Camera Raw. I went through this last week. I'll just touch on it real quick. You want to have your preset settings to say open as a smart object in Photoshop and 16 bits as the option there, so that it reduces banding. You got the highest quality image. I've got that set, so it's always default, but when you just load Photoshop for the first time, that will be on 8 bits and that will be unticked. So you want to change that in your settings. Okay, so this is the area that I need. I could crop in, just so I'm working with less pixels. I don't really need the rest. It is probably not on the exact angle that I need. that's okay because I can warp it. It'll be close enough. I'll pull the shadows up and I'll pull the highlights down. It's going to match then the other images. So every element that I bring in, I flatten it out, bring back the shadows, bring back the highlights, so I've got more to work with. Now, because I know I'm going to use this as the furnace image, I could warm it up. I could saturate it further.
Yeah, I'm really interested into which, like the approach of this part, because if I was trying to do this, I'd probably try 50 different things to try to get it right. Like, should I just turn the temperature up? Should I put like cover overlay on it? Should I try to paint it in somehow? That would take forever and probably look terrible. You know, do you just increase the saturation? Yeah.
Well, I guess it's going to be a bit of all of the above.
Bit of all of it. Okay. Yeah.
Of everything. So I get the raw to a point where, okay, this is probably going to work pretty well. Another thing that I might do is just, let's do a quick mask around the area that I'm going to use. I'll make it a little wider. So when I bring it in, it just makes it easy to see where it's sitting. So I'm going to drop it in. I'm sure it's not in the right spot in the layers, not at all.
I love that sort of stuff. That was such a quick little thing that you just showed then, but that's such a useful like little tip, like putting it in a clipping mask quickly. So you're putting it over top, because I've tried to do the same thing before and you totally get lost with which one is the background, which one's this one, especially if you're dealing with perspectives or you've taken multiple photos. Like I've taken photos of my kid and someone's walking past, I want to get rid of them, or, you know, put something else in the background. But that's such a great tip. That's super cool. I love that you just do it naturally. And we're just straight away segueing in, but I'm like taking note.
No, yeah, because you normally, if you just do the whole thing, it's like, oh, I just covered the whole picture. I have no idea where this is supposed to sit. Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a little bit big. One of my little tricks as well is a blending mode that helps you to see where everything lines up. It's not one you'd use normally. It's different. So it's it helps you to line everything up. So it contrast is like opposite. But if you use that, you can line up the lines pretty closely. So at the moment, like it's not completely accurate. I'm not going to worry too much about it being perfect. This little bit might be good to line up though, because the rest of it I can sort of blend in a bit more easily. So I'm going to line that thing up there. The rest of it I'll leave as it is. I'm going to turn off difference. And I am going to actually get rid of the mask altogether now that I've used it. I'm going to create a new mask and invert it. So now just use my brush, and it's on a low flow already, just to kind of bring in the areas that I want. Now, I might still need to adjust where I'm putting that edge, but it's working.
That's really cool. That's such a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Never would have thought of that.
Now this bit here, because it's not quite lining up there, I'll have a different trick with that section. Because I do want it to look warmer around here, but there's other ways of doing it too. The main bit that needs to look realistic is obviously the fire. If you just start painting it in orange and things like that, it's not going to look like a real fire. But the color of the orange is really easy to add on that side. So if I just create a new layer, and the blending modes down here are the best to use. Overlay, soft light, hard light. I would play with a number of them, but I'm going to start with overlay and just grab the color from down here. It's not quite as bright as I want it, so I'll go into the color and just brighten it up a bit. Go with something like that. And you're literally just painting color on. And because it's overlay mode, it makes it look like you're painting light.
Yeah, it kind of has that effect that it is part of the image rather than painting on top of
the image. Because it's showing through underneath. So you could go as bright or as little as you want. Probably going over the top now, but you can turn it down. You can turn the opacity down as well. This is still going to need a little bit of refinement work, but what the difference that this makes now is quite substantial. So now, because that's what I wanted to do, I knew that bringing that in would then draw attention to the echidna, because instead of it being up here, because your eye goes to the brightest point, this is starting to be that area that's drawing it in, and it leads you to the echidna. But the echidna will need some of this color as well, and so will the hat. So if I go in here, I'll go over to the echidna. Now, as I said before, I wouldn't generally do this step until I've fixed everything on the echidna, but I don't have time in this live to do that. So what
speaking of time, we've only got 10 minutes left, yeah. Believe it or not.
So let's pretend the echidna is perfect,
right?
And all of the nice little shadows are in over here, and that's all cleaned up. And let's pretend that's all happening. I'm going to pull the hat out because I still want to do something separate with the hat. So I'm going to take that out of my echidna group. But I am going to turn the echidna into a smart object. I am leaving the shadows out of that smart object because what happens is when you actually put it in the smart object, it makes them disappear. So you need to keep them separate. Yeah, it's it sort of compresses everything in together. So what you need to do is keep it separate so that you can work with those shadows. Oh, and I just realized that bit I just added was accidentally in that shadows group. So yeah, now let's keep that separate. So now we've got the echidna as a smart object, which is great because it's just so much easier to work with, all these different bits that I want to colorize and brighten up. So then I would go in, create a new blank layer, create a clipping mask. And this is a similar method to what I did here, but it's a little more precise. I will make the color not quite as orange, but still have a warm tone to it. And then go in and get a really nice rim light on the echidna, on the edge of the echidna. And I'll tone it down as well. Now, at the moment, that's on normal. It helps me to see what's going on. But if I change that to overlay mode, or soft light mode, so you can sort of play with the modes until it gives you the look that you want. It's a little bit too sharp, so you can then obviously mask, or I don't like to erase, even when you could erase this because it's something you've drawn in. I wouldn't call that destructive as such, but the mask always gives you that flexibility to go back and forth and fix it. So you can mask, and you just want that rim light to be quite sharp, like what's at the top of the hat. So nothing too broad. I guess the risk is people tend to slap a whole lot of light on, like they might go, okay, new layer, clipping mask, overlay mode. There's lots of light coming, so let's just throw it over the whole thing.
I could see wanting to do that, just thinking we'll just use a really feathered brush. Put it in, and it'll be a soft light across everything. But I guess the difference with a rim light is it's showing the sharp edge, and there's light on the other side rather than I don't know, coming out over everything. And you need to control it because you might look at this and go, well, maybe there needs to be a little bit more light on the top of the snout, but as you're going down this section here, it's being blocked. So any areas that are being blocked by something else, you've got to think about where that light would be hitting. So the same sort of thing would happen over here on the spines. Probably too close now. But it's a different coloured light. It's not going to be that orange light. It's going to be more of a white light. But there needs to be the right sort of rim light, and it can't just be slapped on. So the slapped on version would be, let's go soft light mode. We'll go with D for default, which is black and white. Would you believe that shortcut I only learnt about 6 months to a year ago? D. Really? It's amazing. You can just continue to learn things.
And I wasn't the only one that didn't know it, so I don't feel so bad. But yeah,
It happens to me almost every stream. I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. How did you do that? There's just so much to learn, even if you spend, hundreds, thousands of hours doing things.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people might just go, oh, let's just make this area lighter. Yeah, that's where the light's coming from. Let's paint it on. But that's not how it would work. There's so many contours and shadows in that section. You can't do that and make it look realistic. This kind of thing is actually going to take some time. But what you really would be endeavoring to do is the top bits of those spines where the light would be hitting from behind and maybe even a little bit underneath, but not so much. It's more the top sections. That would be the area that you're making lighter. If you change it to overlay mode, it makes it more obvious. And then you might also shadow sections as well. So it's not just light, but thinking about sort of shadow as well, and creating another overlay mode where you use a dark color, maybe even a color from over here. And you bring that into...
Can we zoom in just a little bit, just so we can see that? Yeah, perfect.
So these spines are still a little bit rough. They still need a little bit of touch up, but I'm doing the dark section on one layer and on one clipping mask layer, and the light section on the other, just so that I have a bit more control. So if I need to mask or turn something off or turn the opacity down, I'm not applying it to everything. Oops, I just went too far. So yeah, so that's the concept of it, to work with the light. So if I zoom back, I'd have to do that all the way through here, but this area here does need that highlight and that shadow sort of through where that light would be breaking through from behind, and perhaps a little bit more on the side of the paw as well. Just thinking about where is that light coming from, where would it be hitting, and just building up on those sections.
And do you have to think about like reflective walls and things? Like this is quite a dark space, like it's kind of grey walls and everything. So there's less light bouncing around, that if it was a white surreal space, you would have to think about everything bouncing around as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you need to even think about, okay, there's some light coming from the front, which is the door on the other side. So there was a door on the side that I was shooting from that was open. So you can use the shadows that are in the scene as a reference. I'll turn the Echidna off. So you can see shadows there. You can see shadows under the rock. You can see shadows underneath here.
So you can use that as your reference. You can.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Do you ever place anything like in the situation? If that, here we've got this convenient coal that's showing do you ever put a small child or animal?
Or I take like a teddy and I put that in place, and then I use that as a reference, and then obviously pull it out for the shot that I'm doing. But reference shadows can be really, really helpful. So that's what I've used to kind of guide me down here. So yeah, that's the concept of that light thing. Now, how much time have I got left?
I would say we have about just 2 minutes left, and then it's pretty much a hard cutoff. So
2 minutes left. Do you want to see some puppet warp?
Yeah, let's check out a puppet warp very quickly. Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the hat. I am going to convert it to a smart object. It's almost fitting. It looks pretty good, but I would like it to fit a little bit more like it really was on the Echidna. So I would go to Edit, Puppet Warp, and this is really fun to play with. I always change the expansion up, because what I have found, if it's too close to the edge, if you're not allowing a little bit on the edge, it can make the edge jaggedy. So I just adjust that up, and then I'm putting pins. So pins where I don't want it to change, and pins where I do want it to change. So I'm sort of locking it down, and then I can pull a pin up. You don't want to overdo it because it might look odd, and you can turn the mesh off so you can see how it's working. But that way you can just make anything really fit. And that's how, in some of my other work, like the penguins, I dress them with puppet warp. So that's puppet warp. Then you apply it, And then the other way to make it look like this hat really is on the echidna is you want to have a few of the little spines coming up over the top, like they're tucked up. So you just mask it, and I'll go to flow 100%, and oh, there we go, X. All right, here we go. So just working out where that spine is and then just working your way around it. That's a short one. I will go in this one. So I'm just overdoing it, like trying to work out where that spine is and then just painting or masking back.
And we're going to have to cut it there. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to make sure we have time to say thank you. Maybe we zoom out on the image that we have here before we are cut off. Karen, thank you so much. If you're watching this on demand, you just saw this one, go back and watch part 1 as well. Lots of fantastic tips and tricks, more info about Karen as well. A lot of information about like story art as well. Go check that out. She has amazing work. Like, look at that penguin thing behind me. It's super, super cool. She does amazing work. And there's so much, we shared the Paddington one before. So much wonderful work. So thank you, Karen, so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Flynn, for having me. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone. And we'll see you next week with more Adobe Live. Until then, see you later.